Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, I'm just a regular guy who learns anything out there about AI and try to teach people like you everything that I learned. So if you're interested in learning with me, then stick around because today we are going to learn how to download LLM and run your own very own AI agent. You don't have to pay for subscriptions. Everything I'm about to show you is absolutely free. This simple example will get you started and you will understand a lot more about agentic AI, and you can design your own agents to automate a large portion of your daily routine tasks. And the best part is you can run this on your own computer without any expensive hardware. All it takes is 5 minutes to get started. So let's jump right in. So to start off, I'm going to be going into this website called Ollama.com. Ollama is a tool that contains a lot of models that lets you interact with these models once you download them. So the first thing that I'm going to do is go here and download Ollama. Now I work on a Mac OS, so I can download this one here. If you're working with Windows OS, you can just go click on Windows and download for Windows. I don't know how many of you are going to be using Linux, but you can also run this command to download this on a Linux OS. So what Ollama has is a number of models that you can see here. You can read the description of each of these models, and depending on what you really want to do, you can just go ahead and download that specific model. In today's video, because we are thinking of agentic AI and agentic coding, we'll look at the Qwen 3.6 model and implement this for a very simple task. Now, an important point here is if you want to use this model, you have to download it. And the way you download this model is you go into your VS Code, go down here in the terminal, and you need to pull the model. This is pretty much the same as downloading the model. So you can say Ollama. Oh, before you do that, you do have to say pip install Ollama. Remember, I've already done this, so it'll say requirement already satisfied, so I don't have to download it again, or it doesn't really download and install it again. But once that's done, the next command is you say Ollama pull, and you select the specific model that you want to pull. So in this case, I want to pull the Qwen 3.6 model. Now I have already pulled this model. It's already downloaded. It's already on my system. And as you can see, once it's done, it should say 100% everywhere and it should say success. So once you get this message, you can go ahead and build your first programmatic interface with this model. To interact with this model, you can go here, select the Qwen 3.6 model in Ollama, select Python if Python's what you're using. It'll give you a code snippet here, which you can directly use in your VS Code or PyCharm or whatever you're using for Python. So I'm just going to copy this, for example, and just go here and paste it. So the first line says from Ollama, from our tool, import the chat function, and you store the responses in this variable called response, and you say chat, you select the model, Qwen 3.6, and then you pass a message to this model. The role will be that of the user, so you're the user or I'm the user, and the content would be, you can type anything here. I won't say hello, I'll say well, okay, hello, how are you, right? Let's see how this model's doing today. Hopefully it's in a good mood. So then when you run this, it's going to take a while, but it will print our message content here. That's what's in our print statement. Whatever response we get, that message and the content of that message is printed out. As you can see, it says, hello, I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. How are you today? Is there anything I can help you with? So that's our very first interaction with this model. Now let's look at how we can build an agent around this model. Now I have written a bunch of code here, but it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to explain this first. So the very first thing we need to do is define a function that our agent can use as a tool. So in this example, I'm going to write a function called get_temperature. It's a function that when you provide the city or a name of a city, it will return the temperature, the current temperature of that city. Now, because this is a simple example, in this function, I'm using some fake or made up data here, but in reality, you can use this function to pull temperature from some kind of a web-based API, an API that gets you the real live temperature for a given city. So normally for APIs, you would have to pay for it. So I'm not going to pay for it for now, but I just want to let you know how you can write your own Python functions and use it as a tool in an LLM that's residing on your computer. So this is a simple example, a simple function that gets the current temperature for a given city. So the argument it takes in is a city. So it's the name of a city, and it returns the temperature, the current temperature of that city. So it's essentially, fake data is essentially a dictionary here. So we've got New York, London, and Tokyo. So we just write this dictionary with different temperatures, and whatever is returned, it's basically the temperature for that given city. If we choose a city that's not in these three, it just says unknown city. So this is our simple function. Next, just like in our previous example, we need to send a message to this AI or an LLM, right? So the role, again, user, it's me or you, whoever's running this. Then the content here, we just change. Remember last time we said, hello, how are you, right? So instead of that, we say, what is the temperature in Tokyo? So this is a city name that we're giving to this LLM. Again, the response is going to be the same as before, and we're calling this function called chat. We're specifying the model. Again, we're using the Qwen 3.6 model, and this message is essentially whatever message we pass in here, which is a list. If you remember, it's a list of dictionaries, let's say. You can pass in multiple messages, just so you know. And then in tools, we're going to provide a list of tools. In our example, we have a simple example of this one particular function that I just described, get underscore temperature, that's above here. We just pass in that function here as a list. If you have more functions, you can simply say, I need to pass in more functions. So, say comma, you can pass in more functions. But for our simple case, we're just going to give it one function. Then I'm going to set another argument called think equals true. This particular argument is needed if you have multiple tools, if you want your agent to run multiple functions or decide between which function to run. So in that case, you need to set this argument think equals true. So this allows your local LLM to think, essentially think. It's not really thinking, it's a whole other architecture we can get into another time. If you're interested, do let me know in the comments below. Next, we're just printing two things here. We're printing what the model's thinking and then the tools that it's trying to call. So we print that, or we get that basically by saying response, which is this variable. Whatever is returned by this chat function goes into response. So we get the message from that, and the message can have whatever's in the thinking content or whatever is in the tool calls content. So this is essentially, as you can see, it says thinking content only present when thinking is enabled, and the tool calls is tool calls to be made by the model. That's what's getting returned here. Okay, now here's the most important thing. People think that agents or LLMs can run their own code. In reality, it does not. You cannot run any Python code on its own. We have to find a mechanism for it to run a particular code. So that's what this particular block does. So it says send the result back to the model for a final response. So remember, we're just parsing the same thing here, or we're just getting the same thing here. Response.message.tool calls, the same thing goes here. So if this is not none, or if this is not false, then do all of this. That means our agent, or technically our LLM, has returned a tool for us to run, right? So the very first index within that tool call will be our function. So for example, we can put in a print statement here to see what this technically does. So this will be the tool call. It'll call, it will give us a name of the function that it needs to call, and it will give the arguments that it needs to call. So get temperature. Remember, this is where we are directly calling the function that we wrote. This is not some kind of an agent running a function. Okay, this is literally our code running the function. So this is the function we want this particular LLM to run, and it will use the arguments that it gets from this call and pass it into get temperature, and the result of which will be stored here. And then what we do is essentially append this response back into the messages. And when we append it, this time we say the role is from the tool. This is what the tool is giving us, right? You say this is the tool name. So it's call.function.name, which will give us get underscore temperature. That's the name of the tool. And then the content, right? This content, whatever is in the result, will essentially be based off of whatever result we get from our function call, the call that our code is making, right? So that result goes in here as a string, and whatever this content is within the message, that's what gets passed in again back into the agent. So, or back into the LLM. So we're using that chat function again. We're choosing the model again, and we're saying, okay, this time, this is the message. We did a tool call here. That's the role. This was the tool we used, tool name, and this is the result of that tool. That's what gets passed into the message. And we still state that tool. The tool is get underscore temperature. Of all the tools, of all the list of tools we have, this particular tool is what went into our message. And then finally, we print whatever the content of that message is that we get back from the model. I hope this was a bit more clear. If not, let me give you an overview very quickly. So essentially our LLM is not running the function on its own. Instead, we first say, hey, what's the temperature in Tokyo? It's going to analyze everything. It's going to look at all the tools it has, and it's going to say, okay, we need to use one tool here because get temperature is what the tool we need to use, and it decides the city based on the input that we give. And all that happens in this thinking stage, right? And then once it knows which tool to call, here all we're doing is in this if block, we are unpacking the tool that is selected by our agent. That's essentially stored in this call variable. And when we say call.function.arguments, we pass in, or we get the arguments that needs to go into this function. Now, depending on how or what you want your agent to do, this structure will change a little bit, because in our case, we only have one function or one tool, essentially the agent to run. We use a simple if statement here. Now, if you wanted to check what the name of the tool is and then run specifically that particular function, you can technically do that here in your if statement, but more on that in another video. Then all you're doing is, once you know which function to call, you call that function here, and then you just append the result into your message board and then send it back to your LLM to respond based on what the result was by calling that function. So this is a very simple structure, a very simple example. So let's take a look at what it does. Now, depending on your hardware, you can see it's taking a while to run this, but depending on your hardware, depending on how much your CPU or RAM can handle, your local model may be slow. And another important thing that you need to know is, because these are free models, they're not the best models out there that you technically have to pay for. So they may or may not work as intended, because sometimes when it comes to tool calling, your agent can make mistakes and hallucinate. It might not even figure out, oh, it needs to call a particular tool, and depending on the complexity of the problem, it may just fail. So you need to test it multiple times to make sure that it is doing exactly what you intended to do. So here we have a response. As you can see, first it was thinking, the thinking process. This is the thinking process here. So it says identify user intent. The user wants to know the current temperature in Tokyo. Then it checks for available tools. It says I have a tool called get temperature that takes the city parameter. And this is another important thing when you're designing your tools, technically writing your functions, make sure your function is descriptive, which means you need to add a good descriptive doc string to it, talking about what the arguments are, what it returns. That way the model knows exactly what to expect and what it can provide. So that's the tools. Then it's thinking about map intent to tool. So it says city equals Tokyo. That's all what it did from thinking. Then it says execute tool call. Call this particular function with city equals Tokyo. That's essentially a code that it wrote on its own. But remember, it cannot execute. The execution is in our script. Then it says formulate a response. Wait for tool output, then answer the question based on the result. And then it says I will generate the tool call now. Then it calls the tool. This is the function. Get temperature. Argument is city as Tokyo, and then the tool call happens, and this is pretty much the same thing that we printed here. So there it prints once again here. That's this first line, and then we print again. That's in this if statement within the if block. So we're only getting the arguments there. So that's the argument here, city as Tokyo, and then all of that is packed, all the result, and it's sent back to the model. And the model says the current temperature in Tokyo is 18 degrees Celsius. Remember, we did not print this line. This is the model telling us what the temperature in Tokyo is. With that being said, wherever you are, I hope the weather is good and you're enjoying the outdoors. And if you want to learn more from me and from this channel, do hit the subscribe button and hit the like button if this video helped you and taught you something new. It goes a long way in supporting our channel. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.